This video is sponsored by Alpha Draft, where you can play fantasy esports such as CSGO. If you want to do so, check the description box below for a link. Now then, the ESL One Cologne major groups have been decided, they've been drawn. Now there is still some information remaining, but now that the groups are out, we know which 4 teams are in each of the 4 groups. I want to give my thoughts, I'm going to give you some basic predictions and kind of figure out how could this play out. Like, is this a reasonable group? What will happen to it? So the first thing to note is that the system of how they draw the groups, okay, is based on the previous major. They still use that same approach. And so it's a 3-pool system. Pool 1, this is when they're drawing for the groups. Pool 1 contains the 4 teams who finished top 4. So that's Ninjas in Pyjamas finished second, Fnatic finished first, Envious finished semi-final, and Virtus.pro finished semi-final. So one of each of these 4 teams will be in one of the 4 groups. So as a result, in Group A, Ninjas in Pyjamas, Group B, Team Envious, Group C, Fnatic, Group D, Virtus.pro. Next up, Pool 2, is the 4 teams who finished 5th to 8th, which was TSM. They're called Luminosity now, but they were Keyed Gaming back then, the Brazilians. Natus Vincere, and they were Penta back then, but 3 of them are now Mouse Sport. So those are the 4 teams. So those also have been divided into these 4 groups here, 1 each, along with the teams that finished top 4. Now the last 2 teams in each group come from Pool 2, and Pool 3 actually. I don't know why I said Pool 2 there. Pool 3. Pool 3 is everyone who qualified. That's it. The top 8 teams there, the Pool 1 and Pool 2 already were invited. Pool 2 is just everyone who qualified. So as a result, because of this system, we have some teams who've qualified who potentially are reasonably strong. We have some teams in Pool 1, or in Pool 2 rather, who aren't as strong as some of the teams who qualified. So it means that there's the potential, of course, to have some really uneven groups. Like I made this point before the groups were drawn, that you legitimately could have had a group that was Fnatic, TSM, so there's Pool 1, Pool 2, Fnatic, TSM, Cloud9, and Titan. That group could have existed, despite the fact that Titan's considered one of the strongest out of Pool 2. Cloud9, most people have them top 5 in the world. TSM, top 3 in the world. Most people have Fnatic number 1 in the world. So you could have had an incredibly hard group. Meanwhile, in the same tournament, you could have had a group that was Virtus.pro. Okay, we consider them good now. In fact, go the other way. Go NIP, since I guess people, Virtus.pro won a tournament recently. So NIP, who people don't think is very strong at the moment. You could have had NIP, Luminosity, who's keyed now. eBettle, who only won the qualifier, that's it. We don't know anything else about them. And Immunity. That same 4-team group could have existed in the same tournament as the other 4 I made. So imagine what the disparity would be between the level of those teams, and also groups rather, and that you'd obviously be getting strong teams going out of the strongest group, whereas in theory, weaker teams could be getting out of the other group. So that wouldn't be a good system. But that's a system we have. Now, luckily, that hasn't happened. That the worst case scenario has not happened. So, we dodged a bullet on this one, but the reason I emphasize that point is because I don't like living in a world where that can happen. Because I think it unfairly punishes people. It's just capricious. There's no good reason for it. It doesn't have to be this way. There has to be a better way to seed, in my opinion. So hopefully they use rankings, etc. going forwards. Now, saying that, let's look at the groups that were drawn. And I'll give you some thoughts as we go through. So Group A is Ninjas in Pyjamas from Pool 1, TSM from Pool 2, Renegades and CLG from Pool 2. The reason I'm fucking this up actually is because of that whole grand Tier 1, Tier 2. So, okay, TSM was Pool 2. TSM was Pool 2, and Renegades and Count Launch again were Pool 3. There we go. So, first things first, you notice in my super hard group, I made it that it was TSM who was from Pool 2 who were the ones that you had to be worried about. Because obviously they're super strong, way better than Pool 2. But of the last major, they finished in what ended up being Pool 2. Now, luckily, this is all worked out. Because TSM have ended up being drawn into the group with the weakest of the top 4. Because of the top 4, which remember was Fnatic, NIP, Envious, VP. Right, Fnatic, still the world number 1 team. Envious just wrecked a big tournament now. Admittedly, a new lineup. Virtus.pro just won CEVO in dominant fashion. So NIP of the 4 is at least the weakest. So actually, we've evened that out a bit. The top 2 teams here, it's not even for certain that the top team now will be the one that will go out in first place. TSM, actually, I think most people would favour TSM to get out of the group in first place. So immediately we've got that. Then in terms of the lesser teams, we've actually got quite an even mix here, I think. Neither of these teams are the best in Pool 2. But none of them are the worst either. Like, admittedly, when you start ranking the worst teams from Pool 2, yeah, Renegades is going to be more down there, but you have to remember there's other teams down there. Flipside don't have Simple. eBettle have only shown us that qualifier win where actually they just narrowly beat teams anyway. Immunity have shown us absolutely nothing, essentially, internationally. Aside from beating Liquid that one time, which, as I've pointed out in other videos, is not really that big accomplishment, unfortunately. So this is a pretty even group, actually, I think, in terms of how the pools went. Now, it's not in as much as TSM is much better than everyone in this group. TSM should win this group on any matchups. NIP, reasonably, you would think have a chance to get out in first, but probably won't be going out in first. Now, there's another point to make here, which is something else that's going to make this more complicated, but why you need someone like me to analyse it for you, which is that you have to remember these groups don't play out normally. Yes, it's a best of one, yes, it's double elim, but it doesn't work out like the old groups, because essentially you just play the upper bracket first. So you play the match 1 and match 2, then the winners match from that, and that's one team through to the quarterfinals. Then, all the teams remaining, so at that point only one team's gone through. There's the 2 teams waiting to play in the lower bracket there for the elimination match, decide who goes out in last. And then the team who lost the winners match is waiting to play them in the decider to see who goes out in second. Those 3 upper matches played on day 1 as the group goes. The bottom 2 matches, the elimination and the decider match, are played the next day after they've redrawn all the groups. As in, once they've got those bottom 3 teams, they redraw who they're in, what group they're in and who they're facing. And they also apparently do it. This is where the wording is really unclear. This is where when you give examples of policy like this or give rules, give an example of what it would look like. Then someone will be able to understand it more intricately in terms of the nuances, because I don't understand it still. So they say that the quarterfinals, as in the teams who've already made it through, will then be seeded so that you can't play any team that you were in a group with before. So essentially, let's use Group 1 here. If TSM go out in first place, TSM goes into the quarterfinals, but they will be seeded in the quarterfinals so that they can't play NIP if NIP get out second. That's impossible. Now, with that said, assuming that's the way it works, brother, because they even said that you've already fought. Yeah, in theory, you don't have to have played NIP together. So I assume that was what they mean. I'm not certain there. But assuming that, I think what they mean there is that you put TSM and you make sure that TSM's versus, for example, winner of Group B, second place in Group B since their first place. And then since Group A, let's say in this case, was the one that was drawn with NIP, you know, oh, okay, see, so they'd come out and they'd play Group C or something. So they can't play each other in the quarterfinals. But here's the other key thing. This is the part I think people didn't notice. It didn't just say you can't play them in the quarterfinals. It said you can't, to ensure teams won't end up facing a team they've already fought until they reach the grand finals. So that means if TSM and NIP were the ones who come out of what in our world is Group A, but remember NIP's going to be reseeded, so they could be in a different group. That means TSM and NIP have to be on opposite sides of the bracket. So okay, let's think about that as we go on. So looking at Group A now, the other problem is they haven't released who plays who. Now, knowing the way it goes, it's definitely going to be NIP versus one of the lesser teams, TSM versus one of the lesser teams, but we don't know which. So let's just imagine both and do a dry run of the upper bracket for you, just to kind of get a sense of what we could end up with and what kind of a tournament. So let's go ahead and assume, just for the sake of it, that Ninjas in Pyjamas plays Renegades and TSM plays CLG. Now, NIP playing Renegades, that should be a win for NIP. Most maps there, it's going to be difficult for Renegades. They can play teams close, they can get rounds, but it's going to be very difficult for them to beat most of the top teams. They just haven't shown it. The last time they showed it was at that Gfinity, and since then we haven't seen much. We didn't see much at ESWC, and we didn't see a whole lot of the IEM Gamescom tournament, which wasn't even a serious tournament anyway, in terms of how the maps were picked. So I would favour NIP to win this. TSM versus CLG. Now, let me think. If it's the right maps, CLG can have a slight upset chance. Because remember, they did beat Fnatic on Mirage. And recently, this is what's interesting. Mirage has been a map where it was one of the maps that was a keystone to making TSM the best team in the world, because it gave them this edge over Fnatic. It opened it up so they could always thrash people like Na'Vi. Now they can in theory beat like a VP. They had the whole map pool open to them essentially at that point. Now they had 4 or 5 maps they were really strong on. Recently, it's been their Mirage that's really been letting them down. This is what they've been losing on numerous times. Even in the last tournament they won, face it, they lost that to Na'Vi in the first map pretty convincingly. So Mirage at the moment is dangerous. So if CLG, if that's a map they want to play and that's the map they're going towards, there's an upset chance. Now then, will TSM know this and just ban it out? Possibly. You also have to remember, in this group stage system, you ban out, and from what I remember, you ban out until there's 3 maps left. I think that's how you do it. And then of the 3, it's randomly selected which one it is. So if I'm TSM, I'm definitely just going to ban away one of those. If you don't, there's a chance it could come out. So there's a chance for an upset there. I would still put TSM as large favourites. They still even should win on Mirage. It hasn't actually been like scrubs beating them on Mirage in general. Aside from they did lose a bit at Acer Predator Master in shocking fashion, but that was like a miracle run by Hellraisers and those teams. So okay, there's our obvious winners match for this one. TSM versus NiP. Who goes through? Well, again, thinking of the fact that at the moment NiP has big map pool problems, with the system of how you can ban, it should be TSM. TSM's the better team. TSM has the better form overall. It should be TSM who goes to him first. This group I don't think is difficult. Now then, here's the difficulty, is that when you go to the next day and you redraw all the groups, it's not NiP versus Renegades versus CLG. They're going elsewhere. So let's try and bear that in mind. This is going to be complicated, but I'm going to try and keep it in mind myself to give you some sense for it. So I'm going to have to go through the other groups first to then give you a sense for who those teams might play. So, going into Group B, Envious, Pool 1, Luminosity, who, for the sake of your own mind, just think of as Keyed Stars, because Luminosity, you're going to think of the NA team, but this is Keyed Stars. Pool 2, Kingwin and Flipside Tactics, Pool 3. Now, this is actually, in theory, the weakest group in the whole tournament. In fact, why am I even saying in theory? It is the weakest group in the whole tournament, with ease, when you consider some of the other groups. Because you've got a team from Pool 1 who, yes, they won in Gamescom and they won in impressive fashion, admittedly, with different maps. It was like by the community, etc. They did thrash TSM and that looked great, and they won 4 maps against TSM. That's all great stuff. But in general, they're supposed to be one of the weaker teams out of that top 4. They're still the one that we know the least about in terms of this new lineup with Apex and Kenny S. We really don't know how they'll play in a real tournament format. We've never seen them at a big tournament. We don't know how they'll match up against some of these teams. They've never played any of these teams on LAN. And so as a result, in theory, we know the least about them as a top team anyway. And it's his best of 1, so maybe there's upset potential there. With that said, they did look good at Gamescom. I think there is a lot of potential in this lineup. So I think that they're, in theory, one of the weaker ones, in as much as the system here makes them a top 4 team. I don't think they're a top 4 team right now. They haven't shown enough yet. They've only had 1 tournament. So in that sense, they're weaker. With that said, luckily for them, with the rest of the group being so weak, they should have a very good chance of getting out here. Pool 2. I actually think, right now, Luminosity Gaming is the weakest of the Pool 2 teams. Now, the reason I say that is because before I would have said they were stronger than Penta overall. But because Penta's players now are in Mouse, who now have God B, who Chris J's playing great, and they've got this whole new style and this tactical approach that's matching up really well, and Nex is going in God mode, I think Mouse Sports is much better than Luminosity at the moment. Therefore, Luminosity is the weakest Pool 2 team. So that's great for Envious. Makes it almost certain Envious is going through in first place. Now then, Luminosity, the one thing they do have though, is Furzo, pretty good player, and then they have good strats. And certain maps, we know Mirage, Inferno, they can be pretty good on. So then you go into the Pool 3 teams. Now the Pool 3 teams actually are reasonably weak. Now here's what I mean by that. Now they don't sound that weak compared to who I said is in Group A from Pool 2, CLG and Renegades. Because Kingwin, arguably, are better than Renegades and CLG, because Kingwin have won a best of 3 against Virtus Pro, 16-0 Virtus Pro on Cash. So this is all great stuff. Won them up off Navi. This is more than CLG's done overall. And CLG's never won a big best of 3 series over a top European team. So Kingwin in that sense is stronger than them. The problem is you have to remember that in Pool 3 you also have Titan and Cloud9. So remembering that Kingwin aren't as strong as them. So, okay, I'd say Kingwin's like a 3rd, 4th type level, down there with like CLG. So with that said, Kingwin in theory is a team that should have a decent chance to beat Luminosity if they play them. Now the last team, unfortunately, is quite weak, which is Flipside Tactics. Now the reason I say they're quite weak is if you've seen Flipside play LANs without Simple, they're not a good team. They're not particularly strong in any sense. They're an okay team in as much as they have strats. They have some decent players, like I think World Edit's actually got some talent for AWPing. He can be a good player sometimes. But all in all, nothing to excite you there. Nothing to make you think they could make top 8 in an event like this. With Simple, now they had this danger. They could sometimes have the best player in the server. This guy's wrecking, really confident, taking all types of battles, 1v3s, AWPing, rifling, pistoling. They were so dangerous. That's gone. They don't have Simple now. So, in theory, Flipside, one of the weakest teams here. They're down there with, like, for me, they're down there with Immunity and eBettle, and then Renegades also around that area. Those are the 4 that, for me, shouldn't really be getting out this group stage. So let's imagine the matchups again. let's imagine, we'll start out with, actually I should have done the other ones for the other group, right? Yeah, let me just quickly go back to Group A. So let's imagine that NIP had played CLG. Now again, that actually should be a pretty comfortable win for NIP. CLG haven't shown that they're going to beat NIP. Actually, what's weird about NIP compared to Fnatic and TSM is in general NIP don't lose to the lesser teams. Them losing that best of 3 to Flipside was very shocking. NIP don't tend to get upset by these lower level teams. They actually tend to be the team who take care of the worst teams, and then they lose against the top level teams consistently, and then there's a chance against the medium teams. But even then, what's weird is they seem to beat most of the teams who are below them at any point in time. They'll just beat. They have a good record for that. Now TSM versus Renegades. Now that's a bit more interesting, in as much as Renegades do have an interesting style, it seems, against TSM, but TSM has way too much skill there. TSM turn up with any of those aimers, that's just game over already. Renegades could play their best game and it'll still be game over. So I'm imagining for that one, it's pretty solid NIP and TSM play the winners match there. Group B, let's imagine Envious plays Kingwin. Now there's a great match for you right there. Where does Envious go in terms of maps? What are you afraid of when you play against Kingwin? Do you dare allow something like Cash to stay in, which used to be the old Envious, one of their better maps? They used to like that, but that's the one that Kingwin won over VP. I still think Envious would win. They have a lot of talent. This new lineup, they were just decimating every side of the game at that tournament. Their T sides were incredible. CT sides were locked down. They should win this match. Kingwin, I think, maybe overperformed a little bit in that win over Virtus.pro. Like they should have won more close fashion, but they dominated the last map. Let's imagine Luminosity plays Flipside. Now, because I think Flipside's quite weak, Flipside can win this for sure, because the thing about Luminosity is they don't have a lot of fraggers, so you can beat them just fragging wise. That's possible. Tactically, Flipside are okay. I think actually that Blade has some decent tactics, just that not everyone executes them. Like, I think some of the members in their team fuck stuff up all the time. But Luminosity, I think, has better tactics. So I would favour Luminosity's slight edge in that matchup. But that's one where there's a real chance for even the lesser team to be going into the winners match. Now, in the winners match there, I've got Envious versus Luminosity. Luminosity, admittedly, by a narrow amount. Envious should win this. Tactically, it shouldn't make enough of a difference. They have the players, they have the skill. They can have the best player in the server from multiple different angles. Meanwhile, Luminosity is very unlikely Fur's going to outfrag everyone. It's just probably not going to happen. So Envious should be definitely getting out in first place. But let's imagine we go the other way. Let's imagine Envious plays Flipside. I think this would be a whitewash. It'd be absolute domination. Teams like Envious, especially their old lineup, but this one new one as well that's filled with skill, love to play teams like Flipside that try to play tactically but don't have a lot of skill. They just eat those teams up. Luminosity play Kingwin. Imagine this match. I actually think Kingwin will win this match. If Kingwin plays Luminosity, I actually think that Kingwin has the fraggers where they should be able to beat up Luminosity. And in terms of maps, as long as they're smart with where they go in terms of the bans, I think they can get this to maps where you can frag. They can get this to something like Dust 2. They can get this to maybe even something like Overpass. Maybe Luminosity would leave that in. I think they might actually. So I think there's a good chance Kingwin. In fact, out of the two, I would pick Kingwin to win that in a best of one. So I think there we've got Kingwin going into the winners match. So now we've got Envious Kingwin anyway in the winners match, which again I'd say Envious would win. So I got any Envious going out of that group no matter what. And most likely, depends which way we go, it's either Flipside and Kingwin going down, or it's, well, everyone's going down, but into the elimination match, or it's the Luminosity Flipside. Group C, Fnatic, Pool 1, Na'Vi, Pool 2, Titan and eBettle, Pool 3. So Fnatic, on paper, the strongest Pool 1 team. They're the best against the most opponents. They consistently place the highest of any team in the world. They have the best player in the world, Olaf Meister. They have one of the best map pools, especially with TSM's map pool falling apart these last few months. They have the best overall map pool. So before we even look into the matchups, they should certainly be going out of this group in first place. Now let's look at the context. Let's imagine, the rest of the teams. So Na'Vi, here's where it's getting dangerous. So of the Pool 2 teams, once you get past TSM, Na'Vi is a really strong Pool 2 team. Because in my rankings, I have the top 3 as Fnatic, Na'Vi, TSM. So number 2 and number 3 in the world in my rankings are in Pool 2. So at the moment, I actually have Na'Vi overall ranked as the best of Pool 2. Though admittedly, I think TSM are a better team overall. But in terms of recent form, etc., Na'Vi has that status. I just think TSM can beat the better teams more often in a more convincing fashion on more maps. So that was my logic for that. Now, Na'Vi admittedly had a little bit of a run in at CEVO, but even then they still made the final. They still managed to beat up Mouse Sports convincingly. They're still a very good team. They're still an excellent team. They're not as hot as they were before. They're still very good. And in a group like this, they have a good chance to get out. But This is the thing. So they have a decent chance to play against Fnatic and get a win there. I don't think they will, because Fnatic's always matched up well against Navi, but they've got a chance to. They can play this as a close game, and some maps Fnatic's going to want to stay away from. But here's where it gets interesting, is in Pool 2, Titan, for my money, we haven't seen them play much yet, should, when things all play out, and we've seen enough tournaments, should end up being the second best team that's in Pool 3. Because Pool 3 has Cloud9, obviously they're far and away the best team in Pool 3, but I think Titan, in the end, when things are figured out, should be the best team, second best team in Pool 3. I hope I haven't been fucking up Pool all the time. I keep saying it because they made Pool 2 be Pool 3 in other systems. Forget that. Pool 3. But obviously Titan, as one of the better Pool 3 teams, has a shot at maybe upsetting a Na'Vi on a map. It's not that likely right now, not that likely for Fnatic, because unfortunately for Titan, they've got Na'Vi and Fnatic where it's like, well, they're so good. Now, if Titan, remember, could have been in the group that has Envious and Luminosity, hey, well, already we're cooking with gas right there, right? That's a possibility. No, they didn't. They got this group that in theory has the two number 1 and number 2 ranked teams in the world in. Therefore, they shouldn't be getting out in that sense. eBettle, finally, should be considered the second worst team at this tournament. Second or third worst. Because all they did was that qualifier. They won one game. It wasn't like Hellraisers. They won 16-14, and then they won in like double, triple overtime against Titan. These weren't super convincing wins. These were by the minimum margin, and this isn't a team we've ever seen anything from before. And it's not a team that we look at and we're like, wow, what crazy fraggers, great LAN results. No, we don't. So we have to say one of the worst teams in theory. So bearing in mind the 3 teams they're in a group with, shouldn't be getting out. But remember, they're going to redraw the groups then. So, okay, now let's look. Imagine Fnatic plays Titan. Now, Fnatic in theory should beat anyone in this group, but let's say Fnatic plays Titan, okay. The problem is, Titan looked shaky at that first qualifier. We haven't seen enough from them. And that whole advantage that Titan used to have playing against Fnatic only came in the tactical area. They used to have 2 advantages. If they had Kenny S, he used to be the best player in the world. They had the best player on the server, and they had the best tactical approach, because the style of Existence's calling has always matched up well against Fnatic. Now then, they don't have Kenny S anymore, so that's gone. The best player is definitely going to be Olofmeister in the server. Tactically, also, right now, we can't say that they have that advantage because they don't have the old style system. They have a different system completely, where now they basically have the old Titan lineup from like a year and a half ago, but with RPK instead of Scream. So we don't know what this team will play like tactically at the actual major. We don't know that they'll match up that well against Fnatic. Even if Existence thinks he knows what to do or can read it, can his team guy execute it? Do they have the tools to do it? That's another thing. This new Titan lineup is lacking in skill. They have too many supportive type players. They have Maniac, they have RPK, they have Smiths. So they really need Smiths to not be a support player in any sense and to be the second star of the team. I don't know that he's going to do that, especially not when we're talking about second stars of teams like Fnatic, JW, or it can be... Obviously, it can be Crims. Flusher can every now and then be better than Smiths, better than RPK, better than Medica. So the problem here is skill-wise, Fnatic outflags them a lot. Fnatic has a better set style. Fnatic has a map pool. We know so little about Titan. All Titan really have as an outside shot is Shocks. If Shocks goes God mode, there's a chance. That hasn't happened in a while. Doesn't seem like that's going to happen. And even if he goes God mode, there's so many Fnatic players, you wouldn't think this would happen. So Fnatic should be winning that one. Na'Vi against eBettle. I'm going to put this heavily on Na'Vi. Listen, yeah, eBettle narrowly won against Hellraisers and against Titan in best of 1. Na'Vi aren't Titan and Hellraisers. Na'Vi's a much better team. Na'Vi will frag the fuck out of these guys. Na'Vi have a really wide map pool. I think this should be a convincing win for Na'Vi if they play them. Let's go. So then let's make the winners bracket match. Fnatic Na'Vi, which really is what it should be anyway. Now this is interesting because you get to certain maps, I think they have a chance. But I also think Fnatic is one of the best maps, best teams at the map veto process. They see, because they have a wide map pool, they understand, unlike teams like NiP, that it doesn't matter if you're good on a map, if they are also good on a map, go away from it, since if you have a bigger map pool, you can now get to a map that you're also decent or good on, and they are bad on. That is the Fnatic approach, and if they do that correctly, that's how they can get, in theory, away from the stronger maps where Na'Vi has the best chance to. Now, Na'Vi's map pool has widened recently, that's one of the ways to be able to come good, but that means if you're Fnatic, I think you shouldn't be gambling on stuff like Overpass, even though Fnatic can be a good Overpass team, because Na'Vi is like one of the best in the world on that map. So you're going to go away from that. You know that Na'Vi's really good on Mirage. You're going to go away from that, in theory. So you go away from those two maps, you've got a really good chance here. Now then, you might say, what about Train as well? Okay, there's where it gets interesting. Maybe they go for Train instead of the Mirage. It leaves Mirage in. Now, Fnatic can definitely win Mirage against Na'Vi, but that will be a tight one. Other maps, I think Fnatic's got a good chance on. Like Dust 2, I think that would be a good one for them. I think if they play Cobblestone, both teams like that, but I think Fnatic's got an edge on that one there. Inferno, Na'Vi has sometimes shown weakness there. I think Fnatic should win. So I think overall, Fnatic's got the map pool. I think player-wise, it's going to be a really even matchup. I think Na'Vi's really skilled right now, and their players in general, aside from Flamey's slight dip at CVO, are playing really great CS right now. So that should be a hell of a matchup. I think this in theory should be the best of all the winners match games, Fnatic versus Na'Vi. So I think that's a great match. Fnatic should win it. So we're imagining Fnatic goes to the group stage there, to the quarterfinals rather. Group D, Pool 1 versus Pro. Of the Pool 1 teams, they would have been one of the worst, but because Envy has changed lineup, and because Nip still hasn't done much, they actually end up now, if I'm being reasonable, I probably have to put them as the second best team in Pool 1. Because they won CVO in dominant fashion. Yeah, they've had some failures at lands. Lost to Kingwin at Face It. Tournament before that though, ESL, ESEA. Top 4 there. Took a map off Fnatic. Wrecked Cloud9. So yeah, they've had bad Gfinity before that. So they have 2 fail events, 2 pretty good events. I think overall they've got the track record that they should be the second best team in Pool 1. So I think that's a good team there. Here's what gets interesting. Pool 2, Mouse Sports. Of the teams in Pool 2, Mouse Sports actually ends up being the third best. Now, that's much better than Keyed, obviously, Luminosity, but they're not. You can't rank them up there with TSM and Na'Vi. Those 2 teams are too good, but they're a solid team. So VP has kind of got a reasonable draw here. They haven't got some super hard team. They've got an alright one. Now, in this sense, Mouse, though, should be a very fun matchup against VP because of how tactically they play. So that's interesting in terms of the overall group spread. Now, Pool 3, fuck me. In terms of the last 2 teams in this group, Cloud9, Immunity. Cloud9 is by far the best team in Pool 3 because they are a top 5 team in the world, if not top 4. Yet they're in the pool that, for this tournament's purposes, the way the seeding of this tournament works, Pool 3 tells you this team is 9th to 16th in the tournament. No, not at all. Cloud9 is much better than that, and they are a team who are a casualty of the bad seeding system and pool approach that is used for this tournament that I do not like. Because it's idiotic to me to use one tournament from 6 months ago to seed this tournament now. Because what's happened between? Well, we know Cloud9 changed lineup. They had 3 finals. They made 4 top 4s. They managed to beat Fnatic in a best of 3. They beat Envious in 2 best of 3s. They're rolling. But instead, they were put into a pool that seeded them lower than Luminosity Gaming. Keyed now. That's bullshit. But anyway, because they're so good, in a weird way, that means that in this group, they have a chance to go out, certainly. They also have a chance to get through, though, because they're so good. The last team, Immunity, I think they're the worst team in the tournament. I know it's hard to say that, because when you get into worst teams, some of these teams have barely played. eBettle and Immunity haven't played a whole lot internationally. So it's hard to look at them. Flip side, have lost their best player. So it's hard, it's hard to go on that sense. Which is the worst of these 3 teams? eBettle's shown me so little, but they did have some recent really good form in the qualifier. So when I say Immunity is the worst, I don't mean they are utter shit and every single team will beat them here. No, it's by a small margin. But you have to remember, because they're in a pool with teams like Cloud9, Titan, they're far and away not close to the level of those teams. So Immunity should have no chance against any of these teams. Cloud9 should have a chance against both of the upper teams. Now let's look at those matches. I didn't do Group C again. I'll do that quickly. Fnatic versus eBettle. That should be far and away a Fnatic win. Should be a smash. No problem there. Should have watched the demos. Na'Vi against Titan. Now that's a fun one. We don't know the new Titan's best maps, so that's where it could be interesting. Because after I said Fnatic are one of the best teams that pick ban, Titan, Existence in other words, is the best I think I've ever seen in the history of CSGO at the pick ban phase. Knowing which maps to go to, which maps are strong, how to if you pick a certain map that's a weird one, it's because you have something in mind that you think is going to work that you haven't tried before. He knows he's the best at that. So he could get it to a map if there's a map that we don't know that they're strong on because we haven't seen them at lands, that they have a decent chance on for the upset. But even so, they should lose to Fnatic on all levels, skill wise, team play, map. It should be a done deal there. Fnatic, eBettle. Na'Vi, those should be standard wins still on that one, luckily. Now, Group D, VP against Cloud9. Now, there's a hell of a match right there because we saw... Listen, I think VP still has a good matchup against Cloud9. They beat them at ESL ECA on Overpass convincingly. They beat them 2-1 in the semi-final at CEVO. Two of the maps, in many senses, were smashes. Like, they did a slight comeback on Inferno, but it was a smash, really. It was always a done deal there. Now, Cloud9 got to smash them back on Cash, but even so, I think VP's got the map pool there. The personnel of VP somehow historically always does well against Cloud9. Bialy seems to just come alive and have classic EMS One Katowice 2014 performances when he's against Cloud9. Just seems to happen. Taz has maps where he just plays way better than he does against some of the European teams. I think VP's a good matchup. VP should be able to win this. It is best of one, but again, VP should know which maps to go away from. VP always has a good track record in general in groups. I think they should be getting out in first place here. Cloud9, the best of one factor... I think in other groups they could have gotten out in first, but it's the fact that they might have to play a VP in the winners match or the first match. That's what I mean. What I think means they won't be going in first place here. Mouse Sports immunity. That should be a convincing win for Mouse Sports. They've got the star player, they've got the style, they've got a good idea of maps. As long as they scout immunity a little bit, should be game over. Godby should be able to read it, pick the right maps, win those games. Now let's do the other way around. Let's imagine VP had played immunity. A very convincing win. VP has a lot of strong players. They can smash this one, definitely. Mouse Sports against Cloud9. Now, there's a fun game because we saw at CEVO, yes, that was 2-0 for Mouse, but one of those maps was pretty close. Like, Dust 2 was pretty fun there. Cash, admittedly, was pretty much a stomp by Mouse. They just were so good on CT side. But that was with Chris J going God mode on CT side on Orping. I don't think that would happen again. If I have to bet Chris J against Skadoodle, at the moment, I'm still going to go with Skadoodle. So I think he can win that battle out. Chris J has had a couple of really good tournaments, but will he be able to actually do it again? I want to see. If he does, then I'm going to elevate him into my elite top 4 ranker status, etc. Orper status. He can get up there, but I have to see more, okay? So that's an aspect. Obviously, Nex can be matched by people like Shroud, by people like Skadoodle. There's a skill matchup here. I think skill-wise, the teams are reasonably even. I might even give a slight edge over... In fact, I probably would give a slight edge over to Cloud9, but I think it's quite even. Like, both leaders pretty bad. Both have, like, supportive players, aren't they good? I don't know. Would I, though? Would I give the edge over? Because nothing can have really big games. Whereas in theory, Dennis and Speedy shouldn't. But Dennis and Speedy have had a couple of tournaments where they've been on heaters, where they've just been playing way above their level. So overall, it should be skill advantage Cloud9. But recently, I guess form actually, probably last couple of tournaments, maybe edges it towards Mouse. Anyway, tactically, I think Mouse is better just in this matchup. Godby's been reading Sean Gez very well. That's interesting. But Sean has a lot of demos to watch. And then map pool. Map pool I edge to Mouse as well, because we know the fundamentals of Cloud9 are these maps. Cash, Dust 2, Train. Mouse Sports is good at all these maps. Mouse Sports want to play on Cash and Dust 2. They've proven themselves to be better than C9 on those maps, particularly Cash, which is the home map of Cloud9, and on Train as well as a wildcard third, that's bad. So I think actually the map pool is what makes this most unfavourable for C9. So I would actually have Mouse Sports edged there. I'd say they're 60-40 to win that matchup. So that would be a winner's match of VP Mouse. Now, I think VP should win that matchup. But interestingly, they played 2 best-of-3s 3 tournaments ago or something at Gfinity, let me think. I guess 4 tournaments ago. And Mouse Sports won 2 best-of-3s there. So his history tells us Mouse can do this. Now, VP in good form should be better than that. But I think this should be one of the closer ones. Actually, maybe this should be closer than Fnatic Na'Vi. It's hard to tell. Just because matchup-wise, it should be fun. I think, would favour VP to go through this, though. Just... by a little bit, though. Let's say 55-45 to win that. So VP should go out in first place. Now let's go the other way. Let's say Cloud9 had won that. Again, I've already done VP Cloud9. I think VP has the edges there. Should be VP going out this group. Now we have to think about some of the potential redraws for groups. So here's where it gets weird, okay? Because presumably when they mean redraw, again, because they didn't give us examples, we don't know this. I am assuming even the elimination match is redrawn. So even if in Group A, NIP beats Renegades and TSM beat CLG, doesn't mean Renegades play the elimination match. It means you redraw. So let's redraw some of the possible elimination matches we could have. Let's go extreme first. We could actually have King win against Cloud9. Now, I'm going to favour Cloud9 there for obvious reasons, even in terms of maps. They can get some good maps there, but that's dangerous for both teams. Both those teams shouldn't be going out in last place, really, but it can happen. Both teams could be fighting for that opportunity. Actually, wait a minute. Yeah, that can happen. Meanwhile, you could have a last place elimination match of Immunity and eBettle. Now, I think both of those teams should be going in last place in a group, but one of them won't be if they play in that sense. So you can see that even some good teams can go out in last place with this redraw system. Now, in terms of the redraw, trying to think what that can do, because remember, the second place team in each group, in theory, is going to be down in the bottom bracket. That means we could have a deciding match in a redrawn group between, let's see, Na'Vi and Cloud9. And Na'Vi beat Cloud9 in a best of 3 in the final of ESWC. So again, Na'Vi could be getting out that way. But hey, Cloud9 have some maps they can win. Not so much against Na'Vi, because Na'Vi tends to go away from the maps Cloud9 wants to play. They don't want to play Dust 2 and Cash. So Na'Vi, you think, would go through there. It's going to be a harder one for Cloud9. Cloud9 could also play against NIP. That can happen. I think at the moment, I would favour Cloud9 to beat NIP. Historically, NIP players done well against Cloud9. Cloud9 maybe have a mild mental block against them. I'd be interested to see that matchup in that sense. You go over and look. You could also have Cloud9 against someone like Luminosity, against those sorts of teams. Meanwhile, you could have a matchup of Titan against someone like Titan against NIP. Now, will the new Titan be able to beat NIP? At the moment, I would still favour NIP. I think they've still got the class overall to be able to do that. They know their map pool better. But if the new Titan can be as explosive as the potential seems, it's not like NIP's players are all fragging super good at the moment. They still have their issues there. So that's why I think that will be more even than when Titan plays some of the other elite level teams. I mean, I don't class NIP as elite anymore, but in this tournament, they're classed as elite because they're in the top 4 in Pool 1. So in terms of the decider games, it should probably be something like NIP versus Kingwin, or NIP versus Na'Vi, or NIP versus Cloud9. So, okay, in those worlds, let's think, which ones can NIP go out against? Cloud9? I think they probably would go out there. Let me think. I think I just said that NIP would beat them. Yeah, that's fucking hard, that one, isn't it? Okay, I would actually give Cloud9 the edge on that one at the moment. Yeah, Cloud9 should beat them on that one, so NIP would be out in the group stage there. Cloud9 against Na'Vi. NIP against Na'Vi. Yeah, I'm going to go with Na'Vi to win that one as well. NIP against Kingwin or Luminosity. Yeah, I'd go with NIP to win that one. It says NIP getting out on that one. NIP against Titan, if that can happen. I think NIP should probably win that one. NIP against Mouse, I'm giving Mouse that one. So there's a bunch of scenarios, if you look at how the redraw happens, where if NIP don't get out in first place, they can be going out in the group stage here. Even though their group, they wouldn't go out of, would they? If it was NIP, TSM, Renegades, CLG, NIP would get through. But with the redraw, they definitely can go out because they can have some strong teams as the second place team who are going to play them in the decider when it's redrawn. Now let's look at the other redraws, okay? So that means you could have Kingwin against Na'Vi. I think Kingwin would lose that one, but they did take a map off them, so maybe it could be fun. Kingwin against Titan. I'd give Titan that at the moment, but obviously we haven't seen so much from them. So Kingwin's going out in all these matches at the moment. Kingwin against NIP, I've already said that, like NIP should win that. Kingwin against Mouse, that should definitely be a Mouse win. Kingwin against C9, that should be a C9 win. So it's very unlikely Kingwin's going through on this scenario. Then you go down Group C, Na'Vi against Mouse. Yeah, I'm going to give Na'Vi the edge there. They did show it at CEVO as well. Na'Vi against C9. I think Na'Vi should be able to win that, but that would be fun at least. Na'Vi against Luminosity should be a strong win for them. Na'Vi against NIP, I already did that. Na'Vi should win that one. So you can see that there's the most likely scenario here, if I just put them out here. So I'm taking TSM Group 1, NV Group 2. Let's see. I've got NV for Group 2. Fnatic Group 3, these are my first place teams. And who was Group 3? VP. So they're my 4 that are definitely getting through. Now, through my scenarios, when I ran through them there, the odds are you're going to get, I think I had NIP beating, Na'Vi losing there, Cloud9 losing there. Okay, so I'm actually getting NIP to not go through. So I'm imagining, because essentially what you have to do in your head right now by running through all the things is take all the other teams and right now just put them all in a big pool and ask who the ones who would have the best matchups against each other and who would emerge at the top. So at the moment I have to pick Na'Vi to definitely get through. Let's see. Mouse and Cloud9, assuming they go to different groups. Mouse, C9, I think those are pretty good chances. Who else? And then if I have to pick a 4th team, because I do, then my 4th team would probably be, let's see, Kingwin, Titan. I mean, remember, NIP can still go to a group where they don't have to play some of these things, because they can go to a group where they play something like Kingwin, for example. So NIP can get through in that sense. But if not NIP, then I'm thinking Titan, probably. So that means I would have a top 8 seeding scenario at the moment of TSM, NV, Fnatic, VP as the top 4 teams, playing someone like Na'Vi, Mouse, C9, Titan. So let's think of some of the matchups you could have there. So you could have a matchup of TSM versus, fuck it, let's just go TSM Na'Vi. That can happen in the round of 8. It was a great matchup at Face It in terms of Na'Vi shocked them by wrecking them first map, but then TSM came back and conclusively wrecked them on the next two. What a great back and forwards. It shows you the strength of both teams. You could have the next matchup. Remember, TSM can't play against any of the teams from their group. That's what confuses me, Vex. I still don't understand how that works, because what if none of the teams from their group get through? Whatever, forget that for now. That means we could have another one where it's Fnatic versus C9. That could happen. Fnatic versus C9 can happen in the quarterfinals. The match that C9 won at Face It, but which Fnatic won in the best of 5 in the final of ESL ESEA Pro League. That could be by the way, that could even be the top half of the bracket. Could be TSM, Fnatic, Na'Vi, C9, who, by the way, I think are my top 4 teams in the world at the moment, can be in the top half of the bracket, and only 2 can go past the quarters, and only 1 can go past the semis. Meanwhile, the bottom half of the bracket could literally be Envy versus Mouse and VP versus Titan. That could be the bottom half of the group. Now that's a much weaker bottom half of a bracket than the top half right there. I mean, that would mean you're going to have a finalist very likely of like Envy or VP. Now then, there's obviously other potential matchups. So that means we could have, let's run through them all in fact. You could also have Titan against Mouse. TSM against Mouse. I really want to see that, because tactically I think that would be an awesome matchup. Kerrigan is a good player tactically, has a good sense on the map pool, but I think Godby can get the advantage there. And interestingly, they played together, so that would be cool as fuck to see what they'll do together. Actually, did they play together? Fuck, maybe I've got that wrong. Maybe Kerrigan left and then Godby joined. No, I think they played together. I think I'm right on that one. I mean, they definitely played together in 1.6. Could also have TSM against C9. That's a matchup we pretty much haven't seen. It's a big matchup. We still haven't seen C9 play against them. That's one I'd want to see. That could be fireworks right there. It's going to be very hard for Chongas to anti-strat TSM in that sense. T9 against Titan, not a sexier lineup. Envy against... Envy... Fuck. I just realised I've been taking Na'Vi and putting it as Envy, haven't I? Yeah, I got that wrong. Okay, that's Na'Vi there. Envy's the other one. Could have Na'Vi against Envy. That would be very fun there. Envy's his brand new lineup. Na'Vi against Mouse. I want to see that again if I can at some point. Na'Vi against C9. I've said that's a rematch from the final of ESWC. Na'Vi against Titan. That's actually not that sick one. And also that's not possible, if I remember rightly, because Na'Vi and Titan were in the same group. Assuming I understand the system, you can have Fnatic against Envy. That can happen. Obviously, that was a classic matchup that defined the last era of the last 7 to 8 months before Envy's downfall. Those were the 2 great teams battling for the number 1 spot. Let's see what the new lineup looks like in that sense. You could have Fnatic against Mouse. I want to see what Godby can do against Pronax, against people like Olafmeister. Can he shut Olafmeister down? Can he make trade a no-go for Fnatic? Fnatic against C9 is obviously a great matchup. We've seen that twice now. Let's see a third one. I'd love to see another best of 3 there. It was best of 5 the first time, but another best of X series. Fnatic against Titan. Actually, they were already in the same group, so that can happen. It's also possible to have VP against Envious. Now, that would be 2 teams who at the moment are hot form, and 2 teams that have explosive players, don't necessarily use in-depth tactics, play a little bit freeform, half tactics, half freeform. That would just be a great match. I'm not even sure who'd done that one. It's very up in the air. Could have VP against Mouse. We're in their group, so you can't have them. VP against... See, this is the problem. C9 were in Mouse's group, VP's group as well, so can they really not play them as well? This is why the system needs clarifying. Could have VP against Titan. There we go. VP should win that. Interesting matchup historically, but VP should be the better team there, so you can see how very different the quarterfinals can be. Again, the problem with this is we don't really get to know anything because we don't know how the redraw goes. We don't know which teams will play each other, first of all. We haven't even got that yet. And we don't fully understand the redraw system. Like, I think I do, but then when I try working out permutations of it here, it's going to be hard to see how it works out entirely, because two teams can still get out of what were in the same group as one before. So how did the bracket go there? But okay. In fact, that's why it's confusing, because it says here, with the quarterfinals to be seeded to ensure that teams won't end up facing a team they already fought until the grand finals. Now that works in terms of if you played someone in the first match or the winners match, okay. But surely it's possible for VP to get out of the group initially, and then Mouse and C9 to end up getting drawn against different people in a different group, if the groups are redrawn, and both get out of the group. Therefore, you've got VP, Mouse and Cloud9 all in the playoffs. Therefore, how could all three of them avoid each other? Now, they can't all have played each other before then, necessarily, although actually they could have, except I guess one out of the three couldn't have played the others, but one team could have played both twice. So, for example, VP could play Cloud9 the first game in Group D, then VP could play Mouse in the winners match Group D. Therefore, if Mouse and Cloud9 make it out of the redrawn groups, how is it possible for VP to only meet the team that they played in the grand final when you have to, there's only two sides of a bracket, so you can't, even if you put Mouse on the other side, Cloud9 has to be on Mouse's side or your side. I guess that does work, actually. I got that wrong. Yeah, that doesn't make sense, actually. They can just put Mouse and Cloud9 on the other side. But okay, it's still a weird system. Anyway, I've run through the basics of it there. We need to know more, but there's some basic layout in terms of the worst case scenarios, potential things that can happen. Thanks to AlphaDraft for the money.